So we've defined probability, but note that our formal definition of probability says nothing about how it quantifies the uncertainty of an unpredictable event. For that, we need an interpretation of what the probability means. So we'll begin with the frequentist interpretation, which is based on the idea of repeating an experiment over and over again. If a random experiment is repeated enough times, the frequency the event occurs approximates the probability of the event, and the more times the experiment is repeated, the closer the approximation. So, for example, suppose a coin is flipped 100,000 times and it lands heads 45,000 times. The frequency it lands heads is, so if H is the event, the coin lands heads, then the probability of this event is going to be approximated by the frequency. Now, it's worth noting that this approach does not actually allow us to find the probability. All we know is that the empirical frequency, the frequency we get with repeated trials of our random experiment, is an approximation to it. And so we might say that the empirical probability a coin lands heads is 0.45. Now, there are very few probabilities we can find. So we'll spend almost all of our time on these probabilities. But what can we do with them? The law of large numbers is based on the frequentist interpretation of probability. If you know the probability of an event, then if our experiment is repeated a large number of times, we should expect the event to occur with frequency probability of the event. For example, if an 8-sided die is rolled, the probability of getting a 1 is, and at this point we won't comment on why we think that is the probability, let's just assume that it is. And we'll go into more detail about why we write it this way later, this probability x equals 1. So if we rolled 1,000 8-sided dice, or equivalently rolled a 8-sided die 1,000 times, we'd expect to see 1/8 of 1,000, that is to say 125, of the rolls to be 1. It's important to remember we're dealing with a random experiment. The outcomes are in practice unpredictable. This means that while we'd expect to see 125 of the rolls be 1, we are not certain that this will happen. Maybe 124 rolls are 1s, or 126, or maybe we don't see any 1s at all. Failing to understand this leads to a money-making opportunity known as gambler's fallacy. For example, suppose you roll the dice 999 times and you observe 124 1s. Since the probability of getting a 1 is 1/8, we'd expect to see 125 1s in 1,000 rolls. And so, we saw 124, we expect to see 125, the next roll must be a 1. Do you want to bet on it? And probably the most important thing to keep in mind here is that anytime we say it must be something, in this case, if we say that it must be a 1, then we're no longer dealing with a random experiment. We've lost that bit of uncertainty that says the outcomes are random. And so gambler's fallacy is the idea that the frequency must equal the probability, but the law of large numbers only guarantees that the frequency approximates the probability. Misunderstanding gambler's fallacy is a way to make a lot of money for other people. Now, the frequentist interpretation of probability does have one important limitation. What if you can't repeat the experiment? For example, what does it mean to say that the probability of rain tomorrow is 80% when you can't repeat the record tomorrow's weather experiment? For that, we use what's sometimes referred to as a Bayesian interpretation of probability. The probability of an event reflects our confidence the event will happen, with probabilities near 0 being unlikely to happen, and probabilities near 1 being likely to happen. Again, for now, we won't worry about finding the probabilities. only how we'll interpret and use them once we've found them. So, for example, if you're in Phoenix, the probability of rain should be low, maybe 0.01. On the other hand, if you're in Seattle, the probability of rain should be much higher, for example, 0.8. And the important thing to keep in mind is that we interpret these probabilities as representing our confidence that these things will happen.